Alright, this is working. Oh, it just said I'm live now. So maybe the first time I said this is working, it wasn't actually working. I don't know. But it looks like this is working. And maybe that was just this outdated camera with my outdated internet connection just sending me a message saying, hey, it's working. It's working. My camera was telling me it's working because I'm live streaming with a camera and I had some quiet time in this space here and a spot I could something that records, and I decided to go live. I wanted to do a video just rambling about stuff, and I wanted to do one about, I'm going to focus on Star Trek. I'm just rambling, and I'm calling this the NFG live show. Yeah, something given. Yeah, a reference to indifference. But really, if it was complete indifference with nothing like that given, I wouldn't mind saying that other word, which might get censored by the YouTube algorithms. But that's the extent to which I will give concern. So basically, it's a reference to indifference. I'm just going to ramble and just say, yeah, whatever, I don't care if I sound good or not. I'm rambling, and I'm going to ramble about Star Trek, and I'm going to work my way to the Star Trek, unless I get disconnected. Yeah, and I'm expecting this to be horribly low resolution, even though it looks kind of good at the moment. I'm expecting YouTube to render this in low resolution simply because of my connection speed. And I don't know if it'll affect the audio, if the ambient sound is going to be affected whatsoever by some electric heaters running in the background. But I don't want to be cold. It's not been all that cold of a March, for March, but it's March, so it's not warm, and there's heat being provided by electric heaters. And now my nose is itchy. I'm scratching my nose on the camera and looking at my acne on the screen, and I'm deteriorating. And I'm also going to consume caffeine while I'm recording this. I got my can of Mean Bean flavored stuff, which reminds me of Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, which I like saying because that's the best puzzle game ever made. The first time I experimented with just rambling in front of the camera, I thought to myself, not good, but not as bad as I thought it would be, except for when I started talking about politics. Of course, I was tired and heavily caffeinated, but again, I don't really think I slept all that much last night either. Oh, caffeine. Yeah, I wanted to talk about a little bit of everything. And I wanted to recommend just looking into an issue, just crazy crazy stuff said by Henry Kissinger. Henry, can I do that voice? Henry Kissinger. No, I can't do that. Harry Kissinger. No, Harry Krishners were different. Henry. Fuck. You see, I go to talk about politics, and then I want to move off to talk about something entirely different. Yeah, I just shouldn't try to talk about politics. But Henry Kissinger basically was saying it's tempting to nuke North Korea, and then I just rambled on about what a stupid, horrible thing to say that it was. And I want people to just look into his horrible history and so forth. And the Secular Talk did a great video on that subject. And I even, started to use a metaphor, using, just sort of a certain mindset, and I tried to use the Iraq War as a metaphor to, it's like, I can't believe, people think stuff like this, and using that as a metaphor. And it was just a jumbled mess. An even worse jumbled mess than what I'm doing right now. So, I'm going to focus on entertainment. I was relatively happy with rambling on about a proton pack when I did what I would consider the prototypical video, just to see what it looks like if I get in front of the camera and just ramble, and it's live, so I'm not going to be tempted to waste a whole bunch of time editing it. And holy crap, that I've already killed almost 5 minutes. Another 5 seconds, another 4 seconds. We're down to 5 minutes of me just rambling. Good job. I wasted your time for 5 minutes. And it's only gonna get worse. Yeah, but stick around anyway. Since I'm live streaming this to YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. It won't actually affect whether or not you see more of my videos, because subscriptions don't seem to affect that whatsoever. They tend to just show you whatever they want you to see, or whoever you've recently viewed a fair bit, but it helps small channels be acknowledged by YouTube. So subscribe to lots of small channels. Even if you don't want to watch them, it's not like it's going to help you actually see them. Yeah. YouTube. Another well-designed aspect of YouTube. Good job, YouTube. You're so great, and everybody loves you for it. Yeah. All right. So I was thinking about, getting around to talk about Star Trek if I don't use up too much time, because I'm not going to ramble for too long, because I actually have stuff I need to do today. Yeah, that happens. All right. So, today, Stargate. I was watching some Stargate today. More caffeine. Yeah. And, it was the last episode of Stargate SG-1, and the first episode of Stargate SG-1 was on today. And, yeah, they aired the last one, then they went through the cycle, then you get the first episode, and, whatever. On the Space Channel. Space. The Imagination Station. And, I guess it's a good day just to talk about science fiction then. Stargate is not Star Trek. But when I think back to the 20s, 2000 to 2010, I was already into science fiction. And then when I think of, what was current then, as well as the great science fiction of the 1900s, it always came down to 4.5, because there's always that oddball thing. Well, in a way, almost... Well, a fifth and a sixth to a degree. But the four main science fiction empires to me were, of course, Star Trek has to be in there. And nowadays, more so than ever, Star Wars has... But, back in the early 20s in the 90s, Star Wars was... It was whatever. But, you had Star Trek, you had Star Wars, you had Stargate, and you had Babylon 5. Good old Babylon 5. Everybody's forgotten about it now, but you just shouldn't forget about Babylon 5. And then, to a degree, that point 4, it's not really in the top 4, the 4 iconic most, but Farscape was pretty damn awesome, too. And I'd say, if you were to add another 2 to the list, 2 bonus ones, I'd say Farscape and Andromeda. And I say Andromeda with a certain level of pain. And if you've watched Andromeda from beginning to end, or at least seen a little bit of each season, you'd know why. Because season 1 was amazing with great world building. I didn't think I was going to like the show. Other people talked about it. I had one friend who was like, oh yeah, I think the show's going to be great, blah, 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 whatever. Another one of my friends said, oh yeah, I saw an episode or 2 of it. It was Allie blew that. I'm going to avoid using curse words in case you haven't noticed. Blew that thing out of the water. Andromeda's first season finale blew the Voyager series finale just right out of the water. Just out of the expletive deleted water. Impressed how season 2 of Andromeda was also excellent. Just wonderfully great, And then season 3, unmitigated feces. Well, slightly mitigated. They had a side story going on with Tyr that was kind of interesting. And 4 was also pretty horrible. Season 4 was just horrible. Although when they introduced the character of Rade was kind of cool. And then season 5 was just as bad as the 2 previous seasons without any mitigating factors. And I remember how they defeated the final evil enemy at the end of it. They went into a montage. Well, that's how I described it. I mean, I'm wasting too much time not talking about Star Trek in a video that I've already announced I was going to talk about Star Trek. And I probably should get to Star Trek because Well, I could get disconnected at any time now, considering my internet connection. Fuck. Oops. Oh well. You didn't hear that. I didn't curse. No. No. Anyway. Yeah. I don't even know if the algorithm really cares about that kind of language or not. Like, some people say it's a problem. I mean, I'm demonetized anyway from being a small channel, so what's the difference? You know, I'm upload some stuff to DTube. They don't care. You know, they're like, yeah, you know, this is used by adults. Adults can use real human language. Why not? You know, curse. You know, but this is live streaming to YouTube, though, so I'm trying to play by rules. Yeah, Star Trek. Also, you know, Star Trek, Ghostbusters, Sonic the Hedgehog, things I like to talk about. And, well, Star Trek, what's some stuff that, you know, I like watching videos of other people talk about Star Trek. Why not talk about things that I disagree with? Yeah, why not be a contrary? Trying to minimize bad language. Why not? I don't know what to say. Why not just be contrary, you know? Yeah, as you could tell, I was going to say something. I was like, appropriate word? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so, Trek Yards. I really like Trek Yards. I remember they do great videos. And like everybody, myself included, they seem to have issues with how kind of screwed up, not the word I was originally going to use, how screwed up Star Trek Discovery is. Yeah, I was going to a word that they can actually use on Star Trek Discovery. And I'm just blowing out of proportion the fact that I'm trying to minimize my cursing here, just because I don't know, you know, I'm on YouTube. I feel like YouTube is the watered down platform to avoid cursing on, so why not have fun with it and just, it's probably gotten quite tiresome at this point. But I actually did want to say a curse word and I stopped myself. And so far, I've almost always stopped myself. But Voyager is pretty screwed up. And they pointed out, but one of the things that they referenced was the size of the starships that made them feel more advanced. Bigger is not more advanced. I've seen people complaining online that stuff in Enterprise was too small because it should be bigger if it's less advanced. But people just complained about Enterprise for the sake of complaining about Enterprise. Like, Enterprise got some really weird complaints. Mainly because the internet was as big as it was at the time. There was so much built-up hate for some of the directions Star Trek had been taken, especially, you know, in the Voyager years. And, you know, Enterprise got a lot of heat it didn't really deserve. And it also came out at a time when a lot of the strong fan following of Star Trek had already been becoming apathetic, and it was like dropping off, like the excitement for Star Trek. And it was actually very hard for science fiction at all to function at that time in history. So, yeah. I mean, a lot of science fiction and fantasy was just kind of going away in favor of reality TV. But ignoring that, they talked about how out of place when you discover the Shinshao? I can't even pronounce it. The Shinshao. Actually, I used to be able to pronounce it. Anyway, sometime. The Walker class starship, the really cool looking starship that they used in the first 2 episodes, and then they abandoned it. Didn't really get destroyed completely. They just kind of like left it. Yeah, it was damaged. Yeah, it was damaged severely. It had to be abandoned. I just thought it was so weird. You had like this major Klingon ship and that ship, and all these ships just kind of like left abandoned. And then the Federation and the Klingons fighting. And it's like, nobody went back for any of the stuff. One side or the other, you know, must have access to the battleground. If they were at a stalemate, then either side you'd think would have went in with, you know, one of their starships that have good tractor beams and a wide warp field, you know, one of their for towing stuff, you know, and went for some of the debris, which, you know, would be some of their own ships and stuff like that, and maybe capture some of the enemy stuff. Neither the Klingons or the Federation went back for any of that stuff. Okay. Stop complaining about that. Anyway, the reference was that it seemed out of place. And it did kind of seem out of place to see a ship that's that big in the time period of the Constitution class. It did seem kind of out of place, but it explained why a ship that old would be such a valuable ship. And why do I think it's a valuable ship? Well, in another episode, the captain of that ship, I thought she was a real cool character. You only get to see her for 2 episodes, but she was probably my favorite character in those first 2 episodes. And of course, after that she dies, but then you see a mirror universe version of her, and I'm not going to worry about spoilers at this point. The season finale's already been out, and yeah, so of course that captain ends up dead, but later we'll see a mirror universe version of her, whatever. But I thought it was a real cool character. And they also established she was one of Starfleet's greatest captains. There's like some sort of on-screen line that references her in a later episode, which makes... I'm pretty sure it was her they reference as, you know, this highly decorated captain. I almost said crapton. I'm tired and my throat is a little bit dry other than the caffeine. Caffeinated beverage. Crapton. Crapton of the Discovery. Yeah, what a crappy ship. What a crappy series, actually. But no, the really cool ship at the start of it. Why was this captain, who was viewed as one of Starfleet's greatest captains at that time, in command of such an old ship? It had phasers, but it also had phase cannons. I like that when they reference the phase cannons. Good old phase cannons. Yep, they're not a phased energy rectification weapon, but they're a phased modulation. 2 very different things. And how similar in effect they are is they're both particle beam weapons, but neither of them are phase disruptors, nor are they spiral wave disruptors, or even a forced plasma phaser. They're none of those things. They're all different, but they're all particle beam weapons. Or plasma beam. Particle plasma, whatever. Anyway, and phase cannons. I like that. Phase cannons and phasers. Yay. Man, I'm really rambling bad. I'm really not going very fast with this. But yeah, but no, it was a huge ship. Now, the fact that the captain, the one that was in command of it, had such a big ship, doesn't tell me that the ship was advanced, but tells me a lot of resources went into building the ship. Probably, if with more advancements, something equivalent or better could be built with less resources and smaller, you know. And that tells me that the ship, a lot of resources were put into it. So maybe it was designed to carry a lot of people or a lot of hardware or, take on a lot of important missions at a far distance away from the Federation, or at least from well-established Federation space. You know, like surveying and helping out with colonies and doing a lot of the important work that a starship should be doing when it's not fighting Klingons. And also, it's a big, big ship. Maybe also that they'd have extra shield generators on board to make it all the more tough in a fight, you know? Stuff like that. So it was a very old ship, but it was a big ship, which makes me think it was probably a very useful ship. And that would explain why a highly valued, highly established, and highly regarded captain, one of the highest of regard of all times, would be in such an old ship. Because even if it was an old rust bucket, which it shouldn't really rust in the vacuum of space, but even if it was an old rust bucket that doesn't rust because it's in the vacuum of space, that would explain why such a valuable asset to Starfleet would be given command of it, because despite the fact it was old, it was a highly valued ship. That's my thoughts. That's my thoughts. A lot of resources must have went into building it at its time, and it became a valued asset to the Federation, and it's one of their most important captains was given command of it. That's my thoughts. That like to me, it seems natural that it was a big ship. When I just thought of, it's like on screen they described her as one of the most highly regarded or whatever captains, and I thought to myself, yeah, I thought she was a cool character, but they're only mentioning like people that we already know about, in Star Trek. They're limiting the names. They're not throwing anybody in there out of nowhere. It's like we already know about them all, sort of thing. It seemed kind of odd, and of course, and one of them's this woman who she seemed like a good captain, but she was given command of like this ship that's so out of date, that's considered so old. Now, I have no problem with the size of the ship. In fact, that 1 + 1 equals 2, and you add these things together, and they kind of work out in a way that kind of explains it all. It was, a very valuable ship because it was advanced and big for its time, and I don't think bigger is better. Bigger's an easier target for enemy disruptors, stuff like that. But they wouldn't have made it big unless they had big use for it. So that's my thought on that ship. Don't think I'm just making excuses for Discovery, because that is one screwed up show. I'm just talking about that because I thought that was a little bit of a controversial issue when I wanted to ramble on my own thoughts about that starship. What's something else that's controversial that's talked about on Star Trek a lot lately? Oh, I like the lore Reloaded. Watch a lot of his stuff. He spends a lot of time making fun of the Oberth class starships, which is actually one of my favorite starships, actually. Like, for example, if you were to play Star Trek Starfleet Academy, it's just a smaller, weaker option instead of the Miranda. The Miranda's the middle ground. Constitution class is like the big, heavy, ship you can start with. You can go Miranda or Oberth, And I kind of like lightweight, efficient vehicles, so I sometimes gravitate towards the lightweight starships. Although with starships, you have such incredible, powerful impulse engines and thrusters and inertial dampeners and structural integrity fields that these ships can whip around and turn around like a fighter craft, actually even faster than fighter aircraft in the vacuum of space, because they don't have to use or work against air, and there's such indicated such advanced technology that even a huge starship can maneuver amazingly well, as it should. We're talking Star Trek technology here. So but the smaller ship would be harder target to a degree, but then again, targeting systems would be pretty advanced. But anyway, a lot of mocking of the Oberth takes place, and I think of like playing as the Oberth in like the Starfleet Academy games. Was it Starfleet Academy? Yeah, it was Starfleet Academy. It was on the Sega 32X, the Super Nintendo, and the PC. If that was the limit to it, what I've seen in that video game and what I saw on screen in Star Trek 3 when it gets blown up accidentally by the Klingons, they were trying to disable it, but they ended up destroying it. But they did shoot on it when its shields are down. And I could ramble on about how if the ship's shields are down, those weapons are supposed to output energy on par with nuclear explosions. So, I mean, the Klingons might have been using a reduced energy blast, but they easily could accidentally destroy something if, I mean, it's shields that make a difference on whether or not a ship survives something. And yeah, you could set the weapons to a low yield to try not to destroy something. But if you don't know what you're targeting and targeting it carefully, and if that, it didn't surprise me that they destroyed an Oberth class starship in Star Trek 3 by accident. Yeah, and in the Next Generation, they kind of used it as something disposable too. But yeah, I mean, if you few of the times it was used, the Oberth class starship was, just kind of blown up. They used it that way. It was a kind of a cool starship design, though. Interesting looking. But then what really got me loving the Oberth class starship was Star Trek The Next Generation, Birth of the Federation. And while it's not canon, it really shows a good use of the Oberth class. They're geared up with some of the best sensors of any of the starships, so they can scan at a range that the other starships can't. So having Oberth class starships around gives you better scanner range of local space. And I'm just checking the time because there's stuff I have to do. And actually, I should end this video soon. I'm just talking about the Oberth. I never got that far into the video. Is it really that late? Yeah, damn. But the Oberth class starship, it great scanners, and it's lightweight, and it doesn't cost much to maintain it. So if you build an Oberth class starship, it can travel at an excellent range, uses a lot less fuel and resources to maintain, and it has some really amazing scanners. And when you first build it at its first level, it is a pretty weak ship in Star Trek The Next Generation, Birth of the Federation. But in Star Trek Birth of the Federation, and as established, this is not canon, but it is a starship that could canonically be upgraded. And in the game, when you update the Oberth, kind of like the level 2 version of it, because each ship has its base level and then its improved level in Birth of the Federation. It's not more powerful than a Miranda. The Miranda class starship is still more powerful, the upgraded Miranda versus the upgraded Oberth. But for the maintenance cost of an Oberth at its most upgraded level, even compared to the most upgraded level of Miranda, you can maintain 2 Oberths for about the cost of maintaining a Miranda class starship, and a fleet of those 2 Oberth class starships together gives you more firepower and defense overall than a single Miranda class. So one of my strategies in Star Trek The Next Generation, Birth of the Federation, is to just build and build and build Oberth. I build a lot of Oberth class starships, and then later on when you get like the Defiant and stuff like that, then I start focusing on other ships. And I do build, even early on, I build ships other than the Oberth. But the Oberth is one of the ones that I build a lot of. Because once your science gets advanced a little bit, it becomes Oberth level 2. It actually is a pretty cool ship. And when you start to think about, the cost of maintaining starships, the cost and resources, the Oberth becomes a logical choice in Star Trek The Next Generation, Birth of the Federation. So I would assume that in the Star Trek series, that would be one of the explanations for why you'd see a lot of Oberth class starships. And as for whether or not they just blow up at one hit, well, if the shields are up, the shields are up, and really your defenses mostly are based on shields. Granted, some ships might have the warp cores a little bit better shielded than others, and so forth. But, in just about every other Star Trek show, the ship takes a bunch of hits, and there's a risk of warp breach and so forth. You hear a lot of that. So, I never really thought it was that big of a deal that you see an unshielded Oberth class blown up by accident by, an ambitious Klingon gunner who was only supposed to disable it, but, lucky shot! And then he gets shot for his lucky shot, And here I am doing air quotations, which kind of looks a little douchey, but whatever. And I don't know how else to emphasize, that he thought of it as a lucky shot. Also, I think they indicated a lot of older Oberth class starships get sold from Starfleet, if the word sold is appropriate, into civilian use in Star Trek quite a bit. Another thing I've seen a lot of on the Lore Reloaded was a lot of complaints about the civilians on the Galaxy class starship. I'm not complaining about his interpretation of it. I actually think it was great videos he did talking about the Galaxy class, making fun of them. I just think the Oberth, in the right context, is a pretty cool starship. And you know what? If Earth is about to be destroyed and you need every starship possible to go at the thing, yeah, I'd even throw shuttlecraft at the thing. You know, I'd be like, if it can fire torpedo, if you know it's the Borg, you know, if it can shoot off a torpedo and a phaser array, anything that can throw something at it, you might as well. Maybe not shuttlecraft, but I know in Birth of the Federation, the Oberth class starships have torpedo launchers, so I assume they would, you know. But granted, yeah, the Oberth really want to get out of there fast if they go up against the Borg. But yeah, anything that can fire a torpedo at it. If you look for it, it's kind of almost like a internet urban legend sort of thing. But if you look for it, the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars can actually be seen in the First Contact, the battle in the movie First Contact with the Borg. It's too blurry to really make out very clearly. But the people who made the movie apparently actually used the model of the Millennium Falcon in that battle. So even if some, you know, Corellian freighter or whatever from a parallel universe would be firing its weak-ass turbo lasers, weak-ass compared to when you think of, like, phasers actually, beams of energy that contain particles. They're not purely nadion particles, however you pronounce that. They're not purely that beam like some people make out there, but it contains those particles which can break apart the strong nuclear forces in atoms. You know, something that sophisticated, you know, compared to like turbo lasers, which are basically a plasma weapon, but you know, an advanced one. But I don't know. I actually feel safer going up against the Borg in an Oberth class starship than the Millennium Falcon. There, say that right. Yeah. Or for, yeah. But anyway, yeah, there's lots of jokes about the Oberth being destroyed because they use them as a disposable ship fairly often, but then again, anything that's not the hero ship is often used as a disposable ship anyway. But yeah, I was getting on to the Galaxy class and families on the Galaxy class. Yeah, it would seem to reason that if the Federation went to war, they, you know, you'd want to drop off all the families and children and stuff like that at a starbase. But to me, I mean, if somebody chose to live on a military base or a community adjacent to a military base, you'd be choosing to live in a community that is likely to be targeted if you went to war. You know, if you, I mean, you might not live on a battleship, but these ships, like they do stuff like the purpose of the Galaxy class. It wasn't built with the thought of going to war. It was built with the thought of protecting the Federation, policing Federation space, whenever the need comes up. But they were built with the intention to explore, to analyze new planets, to do planetary surveys, to examine strange space phenomenon. You know, you'd have like scientists all over the place doing research and stuff like that. You know, to me, it never really fazed me all that much. The idea that the ship went into combat and had families on board of it. I would say that the children wouldn't really pick for themselves, but the adults would go into it knowing, yeah, I'm choosing to live for a little while in a place that's dangerous. But I don't know, that's just something that doesn't faze me. And while I think it's perfectly logical that Picard was uncomfortable with that fact, and it seems perfectly logical that when the Dominion War took place, they'd get all the families off of the Galaxy-class starships. But it stands to reason to me that the starships that are spending most of their time, which was really the Galaxy's true mission, spending most of their time going, exploring planets and just, like, they're not supposed to be hostile planets. It's not supposed to be planets where they're constantly being attacked. Even though, for story's sake, that's what keeps happening to at least to the Enterprise D, you know. But that's not truly the full purpose of those ships. I mean, think of all the times they talk about this this group of people doing a planetary survey, or this people researching this nebula. Like, a lot of that is like the job of the Galaxy class. There's researchers on there, a lot of people that are just whatever. I'm rambling the point, but basically what I'm saying is most of the people on the Galaxy class aren't there to fight. They're there to do Starfleet work, which isn't all combat. And some of them, were given the option to bring their families with them and did so. And to me, that just doesn't faze me that much. To me, the idea of families on the Galaxy-class starship seem about as natural as families on Deep Space Nine. I mean, Deep Space Nine is a star base, not a starship going places, but Deep Space Nine was defending either in Bajoran orbit, thus, kind of, to a degree, defending Bajor. It would still be at risk of combat if hostile people came to planet Bajor. Then it moved over next to the wormhole, where it became even at greater risk of being involved in combat. To me, the idea of families on Deep Space Nine is on par with the idea of families on the Enterprise D. And some people would say, well, that's crazy. Think of all the times that the Enterprise D was sent off to patrol the Romulan neutral zone. And I was like, yeah, it is. And that is an additional risk, so that might be set off to someplace more dangerous than usual. But Deep Space Nine also was a dangerous place. And, it just doesn't seem that all natural to me. To me, it's like if you have like a community around a military base, and you actually end up going to war, like, there's a chance your community might get blown up, next to the high priority target. Of course, most of those scenarios, my knee is itchy, most of those scenarios are pretty bad situations to begin with, but I don't know. I'm just rambling, but I'm just saying, given what Starfleet is, and given the political climate of the next generation, it didn't seem that unnatural to me that they'd put, civilians on Starfleet vessels, and and plus they made it clear they don't think of them, even if people want to call them military vessels, even if they kind of count as a military, because they end up fighting forces from other governments. Some people make a distinction between whether or not Coast Guard counts as military or not. But they do a lot of things kind of like a Space Coast Guard. They also do a lot of stuff kind of like Space Police as well, too. Dealing with stuff inside Federation space that might be against Federation law. They're not... Hell, most of the time they fight, they're either in neutral space or in Federation space. You don't see the Enterprise D invading Romulan space. Well, actually, you kind of do, but that's not a normal occurrence. It's not like they're invading Romulan space and then attacking Romulan star bases. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just rambling on some points that I just wanted to ramble about. And yeah, I have no issue. Well, I can kind of see why people would have issue with the families on the Enterprise D, but I never had a real problem with it. I just saw how there's positives and negatives to it, and it kind of suited the next generation in a way. And it gave Picard something to grumble about. So, yeah, that's something. That's something good. Damn it, I really should bring this to an end. I've been just rambling and rambling and rambling, and I really don't know if I've had any interesting insights on Star Trek. Oh, I know one of the things I wanted to ramble about. Some people thought that it was ridiculously advanced that they had Star Wars-style holograms in Star Trek Discovery for communication, when it seemed like there was something they were just pulling off in Deep Space Nine. Well, when Deep Space Nine did it, I didn't think it was like a new technology they just invented. I thought it was something that they was kind of new to the people on that ship, because it wasn't something they normally use. Because it didn't look like something that advanced. I mean, they had pretty advanced holograms already, The idea of using them for communication doesn't seem all that amazing. Like when they talked about setting up like the new holographic communication, to me it seemed like they were setting it up as a novelty. That's why it was kind of new to them, and not something they normally did. And Maybe it was a little buggy. I don't know if I remember that correctly or not, if they had any problems with it or not, or had to fine tune it. But, excuse me. To me, it seems more like just somebody trying to set up an old Atari 2600 um, instead of, when they're used to using an Xbox. Because the thing is, whether it's in Discovery or Deep Space Nine, it seems like the sort of thing they could have used in the past, like they used in Discovery. I wouldn't have put it in Discovery. I thought it looked kind of lame. But that said, the fact that they were setting it up in Deep Space Nine like it was new, I think it was new to them. I don't think it was like a new technology. Because I think it's something that if you ever started using it, you're going to stop using it, I mean, they used it in Deep Space Nine, but when Voyager communicated with home, I don't think they were like, we just learned this new technology. Because remember Voyager, they were lost, but they did get communication with Earth. I don't think they would have been like, you know what, let's set up, instead of the view screen, let's set up like a holographic communication system for chatting. They just learned that. They were setting it up on Deep Space Nine. Let's replicate one here on Voyager, I don't think they would have done that, because the view screen is way more useful. It's like you turn around, you press a button on a panel, and they say, hey, Captain Crunch, I'm talking to you on the view screen. It just comes up on a panel, a flat surface, you're talking to somebody. That seems more natural and logical than really needing to set up a hologram to talk to them. I don't know. So I never had a problem with them using the holograms in Discovery. What I did have a little issue with was how just about every ship seemed to be full of force fields. Now I know all this is more advanced in the era of Star Trek Enterprise. And I know they had force fields in the original series, both for the brig and obviously the deflector screens that protect the ship from enemy weapons. But structural integrity was usually handled with bulkheads sealing off sections. Well, not structural integrity, hull breaches and stuff like that. The ship wasn't littered with individual force fields like in the Next Generation for holding in the atmosphere if there was like a major hull breach. At least I didn't get the impression that they had that. I know the Excelsior class did later on, but 10 years before the original series, and on that really old vessel, that Walker class vessel that you see in the first two episodes, they had like force fields holding in an awful lot of the atmosphere when they had a hull breach. Though I suppose a large part of that might have been because it was in the brig, and the brig has force fields to hold in the prisoners anyway. I don't know. It just felt kind of weird. But more importantly, I'm trying to remember if the Walker class had force fields in its shuttle bay, if they ever showed that or not. But I know the Discovery definitely did, which would make the Discovery shuttle bay a whole lot more advanced than Constitution class starships. Even decades later, Constitution class starships wouldn't get that upgrade for a force field in the shuttle bay to hold in the atmosphere. Because in the original series, when they were launching and receiving shuttles, they had to open and close those big bay doors. And when they did, they had to depressurize and repressurize the shuttle bay. So if they had to do that in Star Trek, the original series, on a Constitution-class starship, which is basically the ship of the line, the flagship of the Federation was the Constitution-class Enterprise at that time, it just seemed a little too early, even if just a little bit more than a decade too early, for that sort of thing. So I had more problem with the force fields than I did the holograms. Just saying, something I had an issue with, a lot of people kind of seem to ignore, but I didn't have any issue with the holographic communication. I had issues with the force fields in the shuttle bays. I don't totally hate Discovery, but I'd say it's probably my least favorite of the Star Treks. My favorite is Enterprise, followed closely by Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. I started watching Star Trek when both the Next Generation and the original series was on television, and it's the Next Generation that won me over, but I also really enjoyed the original series. Then along came Deep Space Nine, and I came to love Deep Space Nine. At first, it was in third place behind the first two, but over time, I come to love it as much as The Next Generation, about 50-50. And people tend to talk about Deep Space Nine like it's the best thing ever, except a little weak early on. I liked the first seasons. They're not my favorite seasons, but I think it did a good job with good storytelling early on. It just got better as it got more serialized, you know, or not more serialized. Yeah, serialized. As the episodes had more and more interconnections, you know, that improved the show quite a bit. But it was a great show from the start, and it did get better. But I found the last season was really depressing. I loved the new Dax, but every individual story in Season 7 of Deep Space Nine was just depressing. And Voyager really failed to win me over. I thought it was a little boring in the early seasons, and as it got more exciting, it got more silly. And then along came Enterprise. Much to my surprise, Enterprise won me back. By the time Enterprise came on, I was more interested in repeats of Babylon 5, Andromeda, Farscape, and like as much as I loved Star Trek, it was my favorite science fiction franchise. I was more interested in watching new shows from other series, things other than Star Trek, than any particular episode. And I was just watching Voyager because it had Star Trek in the name, and I was just watching, hoping for something good, and never really getting won over by it. And I really got to end this video because I got stuff to do. But Enterprise really won me back. I loved Enterprise. And Enterprise became my favorite television show of all time. Some shows came kind of close, but not quite there. I was a big fan of House MD. But, you know, Star Trek Enterprise to this day is still my favorite television show. I was really disappointed with the 2009 Star Trek movie and its sequel. I didn't mind Beyond as much as the first two, but those first two, it was like they were insulting my intelligence with every plot coincidence. I just couldn't stand how stupid and unpleasant those two movies were. Those first two Star Trek movies in the new parallel movie universe. You know, I'm not a big fan of new Star Trek. Discovery, not as bad as those movies, but it's a mixed bag of... Don't know what to say, but I'm ending this video because I got stuff to do. And if I rambled on and you enjoyed this video whatsoever, feel free to. If you enjoyed hearing me ramble, and hopefully I'm not this bad in other videos. Oh my god, I've been aging. Last year was kind of draining on me. Alright. Anyway, looking at myself in the camera there. It's probably best if this video does end up being low resolution. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video at all, feel free to look for more of my videos. I gotta hit the road. So, I've rambled about Star Trek, done nothing special about this. 49 minutes and 33 seconds, 34 seconds, 35 seconds, whatever. I gotta end this video, so hopefully if you found any enjoyment in this whatsoever, hopefully you did. Hopefully you did. I mean, if you're watching this long into it, you musta, you know? So you can feel free to check out other videos of mine. This is just me, you know, how people at the end of their videos promote their own crap, you know? So I got other crappy videos out there. Look for them. Yeah, so... I rambled. That was the whole point of this. Completely unconcerned about whatever happens to come into my mind. Just rambling about whatever with a loose focus. This time the loose focus was on Star Trek. I like me some Star Trek. My favorite was Star Trek Enterprise. I'm also a big fan of The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And, yeah. And I don't have a problem with how big the Walker-class starship was. Though I do see how it kind of looks out of place. I don't have a problem with the families on the Galaxy-class starships. Although I can understand why some people would have a logical problem with it. It just depends on what you think Starfleet's mission is. And that varies from ship to ship and situation to situation. Yeah, I didn't have a big problem with the holograms in Discovery, but I did have issue with the overuse of atmospheric force fields, and this video was supposed to end Look at the time is just ticking away. I got stuff to do. Why am I still rambling? I just can't stop rambling. I'm a rambler. So I'm going to press a little button on this device here, a little touch screen in front of me, and I'm going to end this thing because I got to go. I got to get in a Cavalier and go places. I got stuff to do. All right. If you're still watching, and if you're not, you don't care what I'm saying. If you're still watching, thanks for watching, and feel free to look for more of my videos here on. Well, I'm live streaming this to YouTube. Maybe it'll also end up on DTube as well. Who knows? Who knows where all this will end up? So look for me on YouTube. Look for me on DTube. Whatever. I'm Joey Fancy. This is the Joey Fancy channel. This is the blah 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 whatever live show. Later.